What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Scale News Update. If you're not familiar with the show, this is where we talk about the news topics that happened in the scale world of RC over the last week. This week, handful of pretty big topics, so we're going to jump into them right away. The first one we're going to talk about is one from Proline, and they dropped a little teaser last week of a new body on an X-Max, and it's the Jeep Gladiator. They didn't give us a clear picture. It's very dark and shadowed. I assume that we're going to see information on that very soon, but it is for the X-Max, not for the scale rigs that we're most interested in. At least I'm most interested in. The X-Max, cool truck, but it's not going to have the right proportions for something like us. Most likely it's going to have, exaggerated wheel openings and things like that, far beyond what we would normally expect to see for exaggerated wheel openings on scale trucks. The good news is that they're working on Gladiator bodies, and hopefully we see one trickle down into our market. However, it is going to, kind of lend itself to having some proportion issues or things like that. It's going to be hard to really make it look right with the wheelbase of a 12.3 while keeping some sort of reasonable width. It's either going to have to be narrow or it's going to have to be kind of just compacted. Maybe a reason why we're not seeing them yet. It's hard to say, but I'm going to keep my eyes open. Hopefully we see one. If we saw one for a longer wheelbase, great. I'd be super happy, but most likely they're going to stay right where most of the trucks are at 12.3, if in fact they do one at all. So I'll just sit back patiently waiting for something else to come along at this point. But if you're interested in that X-Max version, I'm sure Proline will have some sort of announcement soon. So check out their social media pages for that official post. Then next we had a release from Kraken. Now Kraken, we've seen in the past, they've got mainly 5th scale trucks. One is an Ultra 4 style look, and then one is the newer model, which is their desert trophy truck style. However, they're releasing a 1/10 scale side by side. Now I say 1/10 scale, but it's actually the size of a 1/10 scale vehicle that you would be accustomed to. It's not actually 1/10 scale to a side-by-side, if that makes sense. So what we've seen so far has mainly been computer renderings though. And then the pictures that we've seen of actual physical models have all been 3D printed. Now this model does appear to have realistic style side-by-side suspension. That is a typical A-arm style front suspension, but with more of a trailing arm rear suspension. Looks like they've replicated that and they're going forward with that design. For those of you who have seen this or maybe seen other side-by-sides, referenced in the past, often you'll see the SXS initials next to a lot of these things. And that does stand for, side by side, like 4x4, just in case you are wondering where any of those names come from. Now, like I said, up to this point, the physical models are just 3D printed. And if you start looking at their releases, you'll find links to Indiegogo, which is a popular crowdfunding website. So if you go to that, you can be a backer for this project, meaning you can basically pre-order one of these cars, and once enough people have pre-ordered, it will become fully funded. Then they'll move forward with actual production. So at this point, this vehicle is not in production. They're trying to get enough backing to it so that they can sell them, finish producing the molds or start producing the molds possibly, and then move forward. That does likely mean that you're in for a long wait if you do pre-order at this point. But if you're a big side-by-side fan, maybe it's going to be worth it to you. Overall, I think it looks pretty cool. Having that realistic style rear suspension should be fun and just a new, scale take on actual side-by-sides. The Axial Yeti Jr. we've seen as a side-by-side, RC model, but that had a solid rear axle. The only other side-by-side that I've actually seen in RC was one out of China that was basically a twin hammers with a side-by-side body on it. So still solid rear axle, didn't really fit the, scale looks of it. And other than that, we've only just seen like the J Concepts body that you can put on your Slash. So this is the first accurate side-by-side model that I've actually seen. So in that regard, it's kind of cool. It does look like it's designed around a pretty beefy drivetrain. So if these things actually do get fully funded and move into production, then looks like it'll be a pretty solid vehicle. If you're interested in pre-ordering and you do get some perks with a pre-order, you get a little bit more for your money than you would if you're buying at regular retail once it's fully released. But if you're interested in that, I'll put a link to the Indiegogo page in the description below. You guys can see or follow all of the details in that campaign at that link. Then next we had a release from Spektrum, and they released 3 smart ESCs. Now these are pretty interesting. but maybe not 100% for us, and I'll kind of get into why. They did release 3 different ESCs. Like I said, they range from $129 to $199, so the price is pretty good, especially once we start getting into some of the other features. They range from 130 to 160 amp capability. The nice thing about these smart ESCs is that they don't actually take additional sensors to pull a lot of the information. Now, there is some things that you have to make sure that you're combining with these to actually get this system to function. One, you do need a compatible Spektrum radio system. So you need a smart throttle receiver, and you need one of the Spektrum radios that will display the information that you're actually looking for. I believe that different radios may be able to display different things. So depending on the model that you get, you will get more functionality out of this system. They have the capability to display RPM, amp draw, voltage, the balance of your batteries, and temperature. However, to get all of that information, you will also have to combine this system with the Spektrum smart batteries. So if you get the whole ecosystem of Spektrum batteries, Spektrum radio, and the smart ESCs, you can really pull a lot of cool information out of them on the fly onto your radio. I do like that. I do like that it doesn't take additional sensors like a lot of the telemetry systems, even the ones that I've used in the past. Some really cool things here. But there are some downsides to this as well. I don't see any censored support. So for us with the brushless side in scale or trail, really want censored, and this just doesn't have that. So for me, I don't think that this is a system that I would actually see being useful at this point to me. Even if I had the batteries and the radio, not having a censored ESC is kind of a killer for what I would be looking to use it in. Overall though, it's still a pretty nice looking product. In a lot of situations, I could find it being pretty helpful, and I always like having more information. It seems like, you know, telemetry and things like that is something that we should have more readily available at this point, and just more integrated into even basic systems. But as we go forward, maybe we'll find that maybe this line will grow into better or more, censored ESCs with more functionality that fit our needs. These are waterproof, which is nice, and they have hard mounting points, actual physical screw locations, and I really like that that feature. Having mounts to just secure the ESC down without having to use double-sided tape. I just really appreciate being able to have a mount in a vehicle and being able to just screw it down quickly or unscrew it to pull it out for some reason. But if you're looking for more information on these smart ESCs or the 6 other ESCs that they released that are air-based, I'll put a link to the Spektrum site in the description below. And for the last topic of the week, and the biggest one, the Axial Capra was released last Thursday, and we got all of the information on this thing. Overall, really excited for it. It's pretty much everything that I really was looking for it to be. Let's go over those details now. For one, we did confirm that it was a kit version. That's a bonus. I think a lot of us will appreciate that, especially with a brand new vehicle that doesn't really share any parts with the rest of the Axial line, it appears. It's going to be nice to really get into it on the first shot, see everything that's there, learn it, and then be able to move forward with it in the future. It is 100% new chassis. There isn't anything shared on it with other vehicles that Axial has. Completely new design and shape, the whole deal. It also has 100% new transmission. This transmission is super compact, and it does in fact have the dig unit that we suspected or hoped that it would from the teasers. All the gears in the vehicle, from the transmission to the axles, are all metal gears. Always good to see. We have seen plastic gears in some vehicles here just in the recent past, so it's nice to see that we are getting all metal gears throughout. The axles, as we knew, are a portal axle, and they're around XR10 width, and that may not mean a lot to some of you guys who maybe haven't been around this side of the hobby for as long, or if you've only been on the scale side ever, but XR10 width was kind of a width between SCX10 and AR60, which is like the Wraith, Bomber, and Yeti. XR10 width was pretty much in the middle. It's about 3/4 of an inch wider than your SCX10 or SCX10-2 axles, so kind of a nice middle ground. Now in the renderings, we saw that it had the Nitto Trail Grappler tires on it, and something that I'm actually excited to hear or see is that it doesn't come with any tires. You add your own tires. It's a kit. Kit tires, not always the best. So they just left them out, save a little bit of money on the retail cost of the vehicle for us. And since many or even most of us would want to change the tires, we're going to be able to just add our own from the start. I'm glad that they decided to go that route and keep the retail cost a little bit lower probably, rather than including them and having to raise it, 10 or 20 bucks. And while it doesn't come with tires, it does come with wheels, and it comes with a plastic Raceline beadlock wheel. So all plastic and no removable hub, but should get you going in case you don't have wheels that you want to put on right away. The chassis is compact. It's made to fit the model of a full-size competition rock crawler, which are pretty tiny. They have, big clearances to try and make sure that everything can really flex around and get you through the rocks. And due to that, this truck only fits shorty packs, which are, much smaller, of course, than your standard 5,000 milliamp stick pack sized. So you will need to make sure that you have specific batteries that are going to fit this. They gave an actual dimension that will fit. So check that, check which batteries you have, make sure that you've got something on hand if you plan to pick one up. The links on this truck are all stainless, and they've got a little cross drilled hole. That's most likely to be able to put a tool through so that you can put your rod ends on easier. I don't know if that's my favorite feature or not. I get that it's convenient or easy. I personally would much prefer the looks of keeping a link just solid rather than having that. I think that's a completely unnecessary feature. I think it is not good for the looks, and I think it's unneeded for actual assembly. The shocks on this vehicle are 100% new to Axial as well, so no more of the standard Axial SCX10 shocks that we saw before. Not sure on the length. I didn't see if these were a slightly longer shock or if they still fit in that 90 millimeter range or if they're closer to 100 millimeters. Being that it is a kit, it doesn't come with any electronics, so you will need to pick up a steering servo, an ESC, your motor, and a dig servo, which uses a micro or a mini dig servo. They gave an exact Spektrum part number that will work. They suggest that one because of how the servo horn actually mounts onto it to function with the dig. If you don't use that, I think that they're saying that you'll have to come up with your own dig linkage. I suppose we'll know more once we actually see the vehicle, but until then, if you're thinking about ordering one before we have a chance to experiment, maybe you just order that Spektrum servo so that you're going to be able to hit the rocks as soon as possible. The retail cost for the kit is going to be $329. I think that puts it in a nice range. Of course, you're going to have to add a number of costs with tires, probably some upgraded foams if you're really trying to get serious. Servo, ESC, your radio, batteries, things like that, paint for the body. We have been told so far that this is coming out of the factory that produces Horizon's Losi products, so the quality of materials and things like that is supposed to be of a higher grade than what was being used previously, which is nice to see, but we'll make sure that it is the case once we get it in hand. Beyond that, there was a lot of talk and comments online when it was released that it looked like a bomber or it looked like a wraith. And I think that a lot of people, specifically in the RC side, don't necessarily understand what when they say it looks just like a bomber or looks just like a wraith. I think that they're just saying that it looks like a plastic cage version, because there are some design aspects or styling aspects to a bomber that are very noticeable and are very clear in the full-size world and in the RC version that transfer across. Bombers have a very particular style with the rear C-pillar that crosses the belt line bar around the rear of the basket just ahead of the actual tail of the vehicle, and then kind of cross under and form that lower bar around the backside. And then in the front side, they do have a hood bar that raises from the bottom of the A-pillar up at the hood, which is probably the only similarity that I really see on the Capra to the Bomber. But beyond that, Bombers have a style where those hood bars kind of go up and tie into each side of the Stinger, which again, this vehicle doesn't do and doesn't even have a Stinger. Off-road buggies have a style of their own, but sometimes you have to look a little bit further rather than just having an initial look at it. If you're not familiar with them, you may say that it looks the same. Kind of like saying a Camry and an Accord are the same car, where they're actually clearly different cars, but they do have maybe a similar, they both have hoods and roofs and trunks, but beyond that, if you really start looking at the style, they're vastly different. But you have to look at the design of the tubes and how they actually go together and placed in the chassis to form the look to maybe really see that. But saying that it's the same as a Bomber or a Wraith is it's just miles away from the actual reality of the situation. But you probably have to want to look and learn the styling of the cages before you may actually notice that. Some really good side-by-side pictures of the new Capra and a Bomber were posted side-by-side by Rich at Horizon, so you can kind of see the difference in size, which is very noticeable. These are very different sized cars if you're comparing a Bomber to a Capra. And while this is a completely new vehicle at a completely new factory for Axial, the designer of this truck is Matt from Axial, who's been there since the inception of Axial. So it's nice to see that, somebody who's been there through everything and seen everything that Axial's done up to this point has been able to take their newest vehicle to the finish line so we can actually get another new release from Axial from the ground up. So if any of you ever wonder, while there has been turnover at the company since it was purchased by Horizon, there is still Axial knowledge there that's been there since the start, and it's nice to see that it continues. I am excited to get it. I did get an email, and it looks like I will be getting one a little bit early, so looking forward to that. I'm going to start collecting the parts that I need to complete the kit as soon as it gets here so that I can get this thing out on the rocks. But that wraps up the news topics for this week. So the question I came up for this week was kind of a fun scenario. If today someone had a brand new Axial Capra and came up to you and you had to trade them for the last RC you acquired, would you do it? Why or why not? And what was that last vehicle that you acquired? But that's going to do it for the video this week. Hopefully I get to see some of you guys up at Squirrel Fest this weekend. Going to be a fun trip. Looking forward to that. All the rest of you guys, will see you next week for the Scale News Update Wednesdays for the monthly Mayhem Challenge and maybe a couple other ones in there with some new stuff coming out. So as always guys, thanks for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoy these videos. Subscribe if you're not already. Hit the notification bell so you see the Scale News updates as soon as they get uploaded. As always, thanks again. Hope you have an awesome rest of the week, and we'll see you on the next one.